Call the meeting to order. Roll call, right?
Roll call.
Ms. McDowell,
Here.
Mr. Olson,
Here.
Mr. Walker, Mr. Erkins,
Here.
Mr. Rastegar.
On his way.
I'm sorry.
On his way.
So the first item on the agenda is swearing in, but as TM is running late, good faith reason to amend the agenda and address that item number 2 as soon as TM arrives. Need a motion to make that change to the agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Right. We can move on to item 4, election and removal of officers.
You're probably gonna want to wait until team gets here.
Wait for that. Okay,
Wait for that.
all right. Okay, we're gonna move on again. Are there any changes or additions to, well, we already did the changes, additions to the agenda. We're just gonna keep rolling. Approval of minutes. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move it.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, approve the minutes. Okay, on to the monthly activity and financial report. Pat and Anne Marie.
So the process continues finding a new assistant executive director. An offer has been made and accepted. But to this point, there's a pending announcement they need to make to their own employers. So yet to be named. But moving forward there. We did use the time in May. You'll see it on the financial report that but we fell a little bit short of budget, but that was a conscious decision made. We had to get some work done to the building. And so there were some small pieces that called in, but nothing of major size for us. So we spent the last 10 days of May on plumbing and mechanical projects. So we were, and timing was really good. One of the pipes was found to be about to be defective, so or fall apart. So Shira, who is here today with us, Shira that received the 2023 Community Leadership Award for Distinguished Alumni from Leadership Voicing. So congratulations to Shira.
All right.
Budget process begins in July. And we'll touch on that a little bit too. Questica is a new software program that we're using for budgeting, and their Joanne Cambrera Smith has been key in making sure that process has gone smoothly. She technically retired from us, but then before she retired, Anne Marie talked to her about taking on the project manager role for Questica, and she, at the time, willingly and gladly accepted. Now I'm not so sure that she's terribly excited about that, but she's done a great job. And so we're going to be rolling that out in July. In fact, we're starting next week. President's Cup and Far West Regional Soccer filling up local hotel rooms for 2 weeks, the next 2 weeks, as a matter of fact. And that generates close to between 150 and 200,000 in rent tax revenues to the district. So
How many rooms, Madam Chair, how many rooms?
everyone between Ontario, Oregon, and Mountain Home.
More than 5.
More than 5, probably less than, I was gonna say less than 10,000, but it might be close to 10,000 rooms. A room nights.
Between the two, I would say probably between 10 to 15,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
And that's this week and next week.
correct.
5th year in a row? Something like that?
4th?
Far West has been here, yeah, probably a handful of years in a row. They're going to Hawaii next year and then potentially returning in 2025.
So I think they obviously skipped COVID, but otherwise, yeah, it's a big boon in June. In fact, double-edged sword. There's Idaho State Dental Association traditionally used to like to meet this time of the month. They had to back up in order to get hotel rooms. So they just couldn't get the blocks for their convention, and it was last week. So. This was Cellcore. They were in May, and just again, as I like to highlight, some of the layouts that we use the building for. So these are all part of the Cellcore, and this is the group that I think I shared with the board last month that this is the highest revenue generating individual event that we've had. And they've outgrown us. The company was bought by a Texas company. And so this was the last year for us. We might be able to do a couple of regional meetings with them, but they've outgrown us, which is unfortunate. One thing on the capital projects, the timing of projects is what's impacting the differential there. We had the Ballard project that we actually moved into 2024. So it gave us about $250,000 credit, so to speak, for this year. But we discussed this morning, if you look in Boise Center East, some of the windows are failing. The company recognizes they're failing. They're willing to replace the window, but we have to pay for the work that goes into replacing the windows. And so there's several that have started to fail, and it was their whatever generation windows these were. They've discovered that there's a failure rate. So again, they'll replace the physical window. They just won't. We have to pay for everything else, the labor and time to put them in. So we're taking a look at. We have a very narrow window between now and November. The temperature has to be 55 degrees or higher. After the temperature this morning and the frost on my backyard, I'm not sure we're going to get about 55 right now, but anyway, we have a narrow window. So we may spend into that 250, but again, it's just timing of projects on that one. The rest of the costs are, with the fixed costs particularly, I mean, they're fixed. Cash position is positive. Room tax revenues continue to improve, and we'll touch bases on that a little bit, but cash position is solid. I'm really pleased about the forecast numbers here for the year end. You know, while the number of events are up slightly, I think based on the demand, if we have the staffing levels to handle it this fall, I have a feeling that we'll fill in some more of the short-term business because we continue to get short-term demand. As far as the forecast on the dollars, again, the economic impact is all positive. So amazingly, the ADR is up $7 year on year. And occupancy is a percent shifts based on, you know, the supply, but it's amazing to see that demand, well, down. And again, we think that's just a seasonal trend now based on post-COVID. But the ADR is up $7 year on year. So positive trends there. I talked about demand. Demand is actually down about 6,000 room nights. So, you know, and that's given increased supply in the market. So again, as we watch it, there was a graph that Anne-Marie and Allie worked on that talks about the impact that conventions have within that demand. And it doesn't seem to shift much. So it tells us that, you know, we have conventions, it's just displacing some transient. But it almost appears that they're going outside the market instead of staying within the district. And don't have any great definition on that one or explanation, but it's something that Carrie and Allie and I have talked about, and Cody, about, you know, what might be causing it. But again, demand is still up. So, I mean, demand is still strong, though down year on year. So we continue to watch it. But again, because the rates are up significantly, revenues are up significantly.
Do you have any information on rates within the district versus out of the district and how those compare?
I don't. And by law, it's something I really don't want to know. Keeps me out of trouble on the reports. The reports that I get are from Smith Travel are consolidated. But I can tell you that the rates in the downtown core traditionally, there is a group segment that I get just for downtown. So collectively, the downtown core has run higher than outside the core. But there's new supply that's opened up inside the district boundaries out by Topgolf. And so that should have a positive impact on demand, even, again, supply increases and occupancies as a percentage shifts. So we're getting more rooms in the marketplace. Demand is still down, but again, it's to the tune of a couple hundred rooms a night. So again, and group two, which is outside the market, has the same trend. So it's not like they're not staying in the auditorium district and staying outside, i.e. Meridian, because the Meridian market is dropped about the same as inside the district. So it's internally what we've talked about is the post-COVID demand shifted once all the coastal states opened and Idaho wasn't the only place to go. The national parks shifted, although Eastern Idaho is still showing a strong demand in their own market this summer, but it's dropped a little bit. So we're sort of chalking it up to just trends in the industry right now. I mean, again, it's tough to just put our arms around, but.
Could Airbnb or
Pardon me?
Airbnb impacting that at all? Do you think that's a significant?
Not significant. I mean, the room tax room is for the two largest ones for Airbnb and for
The RVO.
thank you. That show up on the room tax revenue sheets. They're up, but not dramatically enough to show 6,000 room nights. So just again, we're paying attention to it more than anything else. And the pipeline, again, we talk about this every month. We talked about Cellcore, the highest revenue generating event for Boise Center. Good news is the Idaho Division of Career and Technical Education confirmed for August 24, 800 room nights, 106,000 in revenue. Boise Center and Visit Boise explore future and market industry events to host. Possibly meetings today live west for next year. Allie and Carrie try to bring in a particular meeting / travel organization once a year to, again, showcase Boise Center. Talked about Cellcore already too. Pipeline for next year is already looking strong. 25, I've talked about the spring of 2025 being a challenge between the event team and sales team. They're arm wrestling over some weekend dates in 24. So actually a nice problem to have. This was a slide that Mary Michael and I talked about last month.
Madam Chair, before you move off that pipeline and monthly highlights, Cellcore Bioscience was the highest revenue this year or ever? Ever?
They're the highest single generating it's a 2.5 day convention.
And what's
And
the
there's about
arithmetic?
100,000 and I think about 100,000 in AV.
Help me with the arithmetic. When they pay 150,000 for AV, what's that made of?
It's audio visual. It's these guys against the wall. It's the equipment that we use. It's the lighting. All of that is audio visual.
So that's a line item in the invoicing.
Correct. Yeah, it's
Food
a
and
line
beverage,
item.
I understand. What's the remainder?
It could be operational,
Scissor lift.
scissor lifts, forklifts, security.
Room rental service charge.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, yes, sir.
What are they doing? Are they coming back?
Well, that's the group that's moving to Texas.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why, one of the key reasons why it would be great to have more space. Good news, bad news. I mean, good news is we've had them and there's not a lot of those that have outgrown us yet. So that's the good news. The bad news is a lot of these events are starting to get to the point where they're, you get Festival of Trees who's starting to look at using East. Idaho Youth Ranch that's pushing us at the seams. We got several of the galas, the fundraisers that are pushing at the seams of the ballroom or even using all the other meeting rooms too. So that's why more space would be a good thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So again, this was just an example of what our meetings website looks like. When people take a look at it, information that it holds. And again, there was some conversation last month about, the timing of when the post-meeting agenda or the post-meeting agenda would go off the website. Mary Michael's worked hard to make sure that it stays up there permanently, and then Anna just adds the materials to it within 2 to 3 business days.
Good afternoon. As Pat had indicated, the Boise Center revenue was down as we were dark the last 6 days of the month. This was the first month since 2019 where we were below. I'm sorry, we were below since we were below 2019 except for June of 2022. Our district cash and investments increased 343,000. We did not fund a construction draw in April. We do have a pay app. We had a meeting with them today and we'll release the 959 tomorrow. And then we also should have one more pay app coming and we will be through our commitment for the aquatics. The operating transfers for the center were 500,000. Don't know if you remember, last month we didn't do a transfer. And then this month, the aquatics was 0. We have invested in a payroll and time system called Paylocity. And we are taking a look. We also use another software called When I Work to schedule. And Paylocity has a module that does that. And so we're looking at going over to Paylocity so that all of our payroll and all of our time is in one system. And it will allow the team to manage productivity better. You can only manage what you can see, and if it's easier to see, it's easier to manage. So we're excited about that. And as Pat indicated, our Questica budget implementation is ongoing. We start our training tomorrow or next week there's 3 modules. There's personnel, capital, and operating. And so we'll start that with the team and then we'll move into budget season. Did you have a question? No. Okay. Our investments. This is, right now we have 21.4 million. That is our what you call par value, which is what it would be worth at maturity. We do mark to market, but if you were to wait until everything matured, that's how much liquidity we would have. Right now, there's a $300,000 unrealized gain due to the change of the rates in the market. The prior quarter, our return was 5.1. 50% of that was due to a market gain. This month, year to date, we're at 352, and the income yield is 270. So the difference would be our market gain. We added a benchmark this month, and so the benchmark we've chosen is a 3-year US Treasury index. It's at 3.7, which is a little higher than what our portfolio would perform, because if you see the next one, our effective maturity is 1.3 years. So we're comparing a portfolio of 1.3 years to a benchmark of 3 points. So I put a percent there, but it's years. And we had no purchases in May and no sales in May. The chart below just shows how our portfolio is divided up. The blue is US government, the gray is US agency, and then we have a small sliver of cash.
So back up, is it unrealized gain or loss? The 300,000?
It's a
It's
gain.
showing loss.
Well, that's for the month. But the year to date, we have an unrealized gain of 78,000. No, you're right. It is, the first one is year to date. Other one, unrealized gain is in May. So it's the
The
first
gain?
number.
Or is it a loss?
I'm sorry, what?
Is it a gain or a loss?
It is a
For the year to
loss.
date?
And the reason would be because as interest in fixed income investing, as interest rates go up, the value of the bond drops. Because the way I think of it is I'm gonna pay less because it has a lower rate than what the market currently is. So I'm gonna pay less than par, which will bring me up to the market rate. So year to date, the Boise Center is to the positive 1.2 million, the district's to the positive 721,000. The aquatics is down 129, and that's because of the delay in the construction. So combined, we're about 1.8 million above budget. And then year over year, you can see the far right column, we're 1.9 million over 2022 in revenues, we're 1.2 million less than expenses or above expenses, for revenues greater than expenses of 747,000. For the district, our tax revenues were slightly less than budget, but year to date, we're at 4.3 million, and you can see the blue compared to the yellow on the right. We're about a quarter of a month ahead of budget. We had a much more higher budget this year for tax revenues than we'd had last year's. So you're not seeing the, last year, remember, we saw the big variance where we, at the end of September, we almost had met year-end budget, and so we won't be, I don't think, seeing that this year. Our expenses are 167,000 under budget, and our transfers are under budget for the center. The trends for the Boise Center, we had the highest operating revenue months in the past 11 of the 12 months. This month was the 1 month that broke that pattern. So our May revenues were under budget by 73,000. Year to date, we're still over budget by 630,000, and we're 1.2 million over prior year. 6 of the past 9 months were in our top 10. Room demand is down 10%, and our 12-month rolling revenue is at 10.2 million. So even though we saw a dip in revenue this month, we're still look like we're going to have a very strong year. The square foot utilization by month, you could see in July, August, and September and November, we've picked up quite a bit from the slide I showed last month. And at this point, the only month would be October that's below prior year. And as Pat was saying, with the short-term bookings, that'll fill in. And I would expect that to increase above the prior year. Aquatics, we received this as rent of 7.8. That was for May. We received our first larger increase in June of 38,000. We had the meeting today as well with Aquatics to figure out how we are going to work out the mechanics of the hotel room tracking, which results any hotel rooms they generate, they get a credit towards their payment. And then we also have financial reporting, which is quarterly, and that begins the end of August. Let's see, I already covered the second one, and so, and after we make the April payment, we'll have $400,000 left to fund. I'd added this as we're starting to move into budget. I always go out and look at the economy, and the question continues, right? Is a recession looming? If you look at the top line, which is the leading economic indicator change, in a 6-month period, it has declined 4.4%. You can see that the two areas that haven't declined are stock prices and manufacturers' new orders, which is up just slightly. So these are things we're looking at as we're going into the budget season. When we look at our forecasts look good for next year. The only thing that might impact this would be maybe the events might be smaller than what they were this year. But from a forecast perspective, it looks reasonable. Any questions?
Save your slide and then you all can take a look at it next year and see how it goes.
Oh, yeah.
See whose crystal ball is the clearest.
Thank you.
Any questions for Pat or Anne Marie? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Great. Welcome to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies for being late to you, the board, and everyone else.
So now that you caught your breath, we're gonna go back up and do the swearing in again, for the third time. So, Jody. Do we do it at the same time or do we have to each do it individually?
I'm gonna do it each one. I, T.M. Rastegard,
I, T.M. Rastegar,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the state of Idaho
swear that I will support the Constitution of the state of Idaho
and the laws and ordinances of the state of Idaho, Ada County, and Boise City, Idaho.
and the laws and ordinances of the
State
state of Idaho, Ada County, and Boise City, Idaho,
include all of them. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to same.
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to same,
That I will take the obligations without reservation.
that I will take the obligations without reservations,
That I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office to which I have been elected.
that I will faithfully discharge the duties to the office to which I've been elected. Thank you. Third time's a charm.
It's been a while since I've read this.
I, Preston Muckow,
I, Kristen Bucko,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the state of Idaho
swear that I will support the Constitution of the state of Idaho
and the laws and ordinances of the state of Idaho,
and the laws and ordinances of the state of Idaho,
Ada County,
Ada County,
and Boise City, Idaho.
and Boise City, Idaho,
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to same.
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
That I will take the obligations without reservation.
that I will take the obligations without reservation,
That I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office to which I have been appointed.
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office to which I have been appointed. So now we will go back up and do the election of officers. And I believe, do we also do appointments for committees at this point in time? Okay. So we need to elect chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and then committees are finance and marketing. So do I start this out and say, I make a, you wanna,
Move to elect Kristen as chair.
do I have a second?
Second.
Or anyone else? Chair.
Oh.
Chase nominated me for chair.
Oh, we're gonna do each one?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Any other nominations? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Chase. I make a motion to nominate Jody as vice chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I move to nominate Chase as secretary.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I move to nominate Anne Marie as treasurer.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We got all the officers? Yes?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I just might point out that, pursuant to your statute and bylaws, your first three positions required that they be filled by board members. By the time you got to Anne Marie's, old and new position. At that point, it's not a requirement that it be a board member who filled that role, which is good because you need someone, not that I'm sure you all are competent, you need someone competent to do it. So, anyways, Anne Marie is, that's why you can have a non-board member fill it.
Thank you, Anne Marie. And as far as committees, finance committee, can I make the nominations again?
Yeah.
Okay. I nominate Jody and myself to the finance committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I just might add,
Yes,
Finance Committee, also known as the Audit.
yeah, well,
There's a role for the Audit.
yes,
That's a good point.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And marketing committee, I would nominate Chase and Tia.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I believe that's all the committees that, and then any ad hoc committees that we develop along the way, we can appoint and nominate at that point in time, right?
In fact, Chase is doing one right now.
Yeah, marketing, well, right, you're the ad hoc CWI committee. So. All right, did we
That's it, right?
get everything done?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, back to other business, workers' compensation update, Brandon.
I want to preface this, that one of the benchmarks that I have encouraged the board to measure my performance on over the years has been workers' comp and turnover. Both of those are key indicators for morale. And if there's high turnover, there's an area that the board needs to be concerned about leadership. The other one, and frankly, knock on wood, and as long as the executive director stays out of the way, at least the current ED, everybody tends to do pretty well. So we have a very low turnover rate. The other is workers' comp, because again, it's a reflection of attitude and awareness within an organization. If your costs are low, there's a high level of awareness and training that goes on. And that's why I asked Brandon to be here, because it's a really good, positive message. And a lot of that is driven specifically by him and his role as the security manager. Safety, it's safety and security. And he takes that role very, very seriously, and it's reflected in the amount of training that goes on with the departments. And when you have, pardon me, a couple hundred people who are, when it's busy and you all have attended events, when there's a lot of moving parts, when you have setups and tear downs, there's a lot of activity. You've got forklifts, scissor lifts going around. But because of the training and the attention that Brandon pays and works with the departments on, they take it seriously. That's why I wanted him to be here today, because I'm proud of him and I'm proud of the message he has.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thanks for having me. As Pat alluded to, I wanted to talk to you about some more workers' comp highlights over the last couple of years. And as Pat mentioned, it is a good indicator of a few things for us. But the first thing that I'll start off is our premium. And one of the items is called the experience modification. And you can see that it has a rating of 0.68. That means we get 32% discount towards our annual premium. And the things that go into this discount is the onboarding that we do, safety trainings that are from the onboarding to ongoing safety trainings, the implementation of standard operating procedures to make sure people are working safely and performing their job duties as they're trained to, as well as just all the involvement that our leadership has in ensuring that our workplace is a safe environment, all go into this pretty substantial discount towards our workers' comp premium. It also is a really big reflection on the board support, our executive director and other executive teams' support and leadership in guiding our safety initiatives, like the creation of a safety and security position at Boise Center. So all of these things have gone into helping save quite a bit of money just on our insurance side. So it's a good thing to know.
How do they evaluate that experience?
So, yeah, it's really based on safety programs that we have in place, right? Our standard operating procedures, all of our onboarding trainings, what's included within those trainings. It's kind of a long meeting between me and our state insurance contact, just to talk about a lot of safety areas. Do we do any welding on site? What other activities that they've seen as high risk in similar industries or similar job types? And what are we doing to protect ourselves, protect our employees from injury or worse? So it's a little drawn out process, but it's very thorough. So. The next slide that I have was something Pat, Cody, and myself and Stacy, the director of human resources, went over just a few weeks ago. This is a report from our state insurance fund contact that talks about our years of service count and our years of service cost. And I want to kind of warn you that these numbers are based off of 2017 to present day. So it's over the past 6 years of data, but there's some really interesting figures to take note. The long tenured employees from 10 to 19 years have the least amount of workers' comp claims that come through, and they're not very costly. And then you can start to see, as we get into the more new hires, the not very tenured employees, that's where we see a lot of those reports as well as costs come into play. I also want to note that this includes when Boise Center East was open. So not only were we expanding the building, we were expanding our staff quite a bit. So our span of control, it kind of translated into what our workers' comp looks like today. But what this really shows us is our retention has really helped out our workers' comp claims and costs. So all of the support that the board has given to Boise Center as far as retaining employees over, especially COVID in the past few years, it translates in a few ways. The leadership continues on and enforcing those safety policies, procedures, practices. And then it gives us some insight into what do we need to do for the new folks that are coming in, or the new jobs and positions that have been created. That was most of this slide. Are there any questions about this one? Again, the two big things is the retention has really shown data-wise in workers' comp that it's important to us. So we continue on a little bit more in the nitty-gritty as far as workers' comp goes. Overexertion, as you can see in both the count and the total cost being almost 70% of our total cost over the last 6 years. Overexertion is primarily back injuries, strains, overworking where you're doing something improperly. So that's where a lot of our safety training has been focused on, is how do we do these things properly and safely. And then contact with an object would just be, pinch my finger or bump a hand on a cart between a wall or something. So these are the things that we look at when we dive a little bit deeper into our safe, our SOPs or safe practices policies. So. We keep going, it dives a little bit deeper into the top three contributors. So again, strains being the most common as well as the costliest. Contusions, that's your bumps, bruises, and the lacerations is cuts. All that I have for the board. Are there any questions?
So with the overexertion, what are some of the ways that you mitigate that? Or are you looking to mitigate that?
Yeah, so we talk about safe lifting practices, the general lift with your legs, to lift with your back. It's kind of the common one we preach. It's also asking for help and identifying within our job descriptions what our maximum weight capacities are. And then we actually go in and put things on a scale and we weigh them out to the exact pound or ounce to figure out how much of a certain type of equipment, piece of equipment, somebody can lift by themselves. Anything more, that's when we have a policy of you have to have an additional hand, you need to get more people in to lift that one object. So that's kind of the main routes that we've been going to mitigate those risks.
One of the things that we've invested in over time, not only the forklifts, but also the power lift jacks, rather than having the team push. It's one thing to push a loaded down cart with tables and chairs across concrete. The minute you hit carpet, it changes that dynamic immediately. And so what one person can push on concrete is totally different than what you can and should do on carpet. And so we've gone to mechanized units to be able to, the person can push the one cart down a concrete hall, but then they get the high lift jack, the power jacks, to be able to put it onto the carpet, move it. So again, reduces the strains, the sprains, that sort of thing. So we do invest in the appropriate tools so that the employees can do their jobs and minimize the risk. And again, those are the capital projects that you all approve on an annual basis that helps us operate in a safe manner.
Any further questions? Thank you. I believe we've changed the name, right? It's no longer Idaho Competitive Aquatics. ICA.
What's the name of the organization?
Okay.
The pool itself is Idaho Central Aquatic Center.
Okay. Is that how you would like to be billed in the future? Okay. Brian, thanks for being here.
Yeah, Madam Chair, board members, thanks for having me.
Naming rights.
Just wanted to give you guys a couple updates, and obviously open up for any questions you guys have. Exciting news is we've been essentially open now for 3 weeks. This is our 4th week of operation. It has been a very, very busy place, which has been exciting to see. And probably the best news is, when we created our model and with one of the primary objectives of teaching kids to swim, we had hoped to have about 250 kids registered and ready for swim lessons on day 1. And we have 800 kids registered at this time, and about 600 kids have already gone through at least 1, if not 2 lessons. So the program has been, it really tells us the demand is there. The capacity was needed in Boise, and we're doing our best to fill that void, and we continue to get new participants signed up every day and filling classes. We have a number of classes that we have wait lists already for, which is tough to see, but exciting at the same time, because it tells you that we're definitely filling a void that we had. Let's see.
So when you did the pro forma, was it the 250 lessons given?
250 students.
Students, okay.
Yep.
Okay. And we're at 8.
We're at 800 students. About 200 of those students are registered for future classes, so we haven't seen them come into the facility yet, but we've had about 600 individual students come through the program.
Madam Chair, what do those kids pay and how does it compare to the competition?
Sure. So our lesson is designed as what we call perpetual swim lesson model. So that means if you go onto our website or our mobile app, then you register and you pick a day and a time. So if you pick Tuesdays at 2 o'clock, you come at Tuesdays at 2 o'clock every single week. And it's a 30-minute lesson and you pay $25 per lesson. We've been very careful as we want to make sure we're in market, right? We want to be under market, we don't be over market. So we really surveyed all of the programs in the valley, and we are kind of right in the middle. There are programs that charge between 28 and 30, and there are programs that charge between 20 and 24. We're at 25. So we tried to get right in the middle of that bandwidth to make sure that we are competitive with the market.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We've got 3 club teams that are also renting the pool space. If you are in the pool between 3 and 7 in the afternoons, the lesson pool is packed. The main competition pool is packed with teams and kids. Parking lots are kind of people coming and going. It's been a really fun, exciting few weeks as we try to figure out how we add more programs and how we make sure everyone's having the experience that they want at the facility. We also had a kind of our first, what we call our test event. We had to have one of the club teams that's running space run a very small swim meet this past Saturday. Unfortunately, Nick and I were out of town. We were in Missoula for a different swim meet, but we kind of got the event set up and ready for them and had staff on hand, and everything went fantastic. All the timing system and the scoreboard and the facility itself was very well received, and the meet went off really well. So we're very excited for that. Kind of got that under our belt because I guess it's about 3.5 weeks now. We're leading up to the first major event that we have scheduled, which is the Speedo Sectional Championships in the middle of July. And that will have about 600 to 650 athletes and plus parents and coaches and spectators and everything else ready to roll here in Boise. So we're excited for that. Grand opening is Thursday from 1 to 3. We're excited to welcome everybody to the facility and show everybody what we've kind of put together, and obviously give a lot of thanks and praise to people that helped us get there, including this group. So any questions or anything from you guys that I can answer for you? Jason?
You feeling pretty good about your ability to meet debt service on us and ICCU and everyone else?
Yeah, we knew we were going to have to grow into that. If you recall our numbers, we estimated it was going to take about a year before we felt like we were going to break even. But again, that performance was designed to see 250 kids and kind of grow into 350, 400 maybe by the end of the first year. And we're above and beyond that right now, and that's huge. The events and the competitions are great. Those are great things that come in and bring value to the facility and obviously the economic impact that we've explored, and utilization of hotel rooms and whatnot. But those swim lessons are going to be kind of the lifeblood of the operation to make sure that we can continue to do all those other things. So we're very excited about what those numbers mean for us. And right now we have high level confidence for meet those obligations.
Do you have other programming that you're still looking to add? I know that at one point in time you were talking about like water polo and fitness classes and.
Yes. So, we're trying to take a pretty measured approach to that rather than try to throw it all in there and not do a great job. We want to make sure we do a great job at each program as we develop them. So we actually started, there's a water aerobics program that's now started in the mornings. It runs between 8:30 and 9:30. We're seeing more and more people show up for that each day, which is exciting to see. We are talking with the local water polo people to kind of get that program started. We have all of the equipment ready to roll for that. So that program just needs kind of a base to get moving forward on. So hopefully we'll see that get into place by fall. We'd love to have that up and running for the high school season. The high schools run what they call, it's kind of a club sport. It's not a recognized sport within the IHSAA. But that program is really taking kind of a hit because of COVID and available space. So we're hoping that we kind of help fill that void and hopefully kind of reinstate that high school program, which should then help the club program and whatnot. We also have a couple of our swimming instructors have an interest in teaching kayak classes as well as some level of scuba diving or diving classes. So we're looking to see how we can schedule those into the platform as well as we move forward.
What's your punch list for construction?
A few items left. We're doing pretty well. So our outside area north of the property, which will be a synthetic turf product, is being installed this week and next. We will have a fencing product that's going to go along that north side property line that will begin by the end of July. We have the main electrical component, the main panel that we've kind of talked about is actually in. We have it. We're just waiting for the right timing in order to shut down the facility for 48 hours or to install that. So that's probably gonna be an August timeline. We'll get through our events. And then we've got a weekend picked out, which we'll close the facility for 48 hours, swap out the temporary panel for the permanent panel. Those are really the three main items. There's a lot of little things, kind of like moving to your house, right? Walk around, you find little things here and there. But for the most part, those are really the only major items that we have left to tackle. The rest are just kind of a lot of cosmetic things and fixes here and there.
What's your capacity for swim lessons? You said 800, 600 current.
There's still openings. It just kind of depends on the time of day. I mean, that's the challenge, right? I mean, as we go through the summer months, we are able to service a lot more kids in the morning. There is a lot of availability in those classes that run between 10 and noon. As we get into those after hours, that kind of, 3:30 to 7:30 range, when a lot of parents are getting off work and trying to bring their kids in, those classes are definitely starting to fill. As we move towards the fall, we're going to be adding more capacity kind of before and after that. Probably span between 3 and probably all the way up to 8 if possible, because we're going to find that those morning classes, some of those kids are in school and they're going to need to shift. So we still have room. A lot of it's instructor based, right? We've got to be able to find the instructors to teach the classes. We don't like to have more than 8 classes in the pool at once, just so each class has adequate space. Those classes range in size, right? Some classes only have 2 to 3 kids. We've got what we call our all-stars, which is kind of a pre-competitive level. That's kind of the highest level of our program. We'll have 10 to 15 in that group because it's kind of running a little bit more as almost like a swim practice type of thing as we get ready to hopefully get those kids to push into us, maybe a swim team or something of that nature. So it depends on the size of the group, but yeah, we're hoping that we haven't reached that, obviously. We still think that there's room. There are still a lot of classes that have spaces available. It just kind of depends on that specific time slot and that on the level of your child.
What is your marketing plan? I mean, do you have, since you're kind of full on some of these, do you plan to advertise for these marketing, for these swim lessons and or fitness classes, or what's kind of your plan moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, swimming lessons in particular, I mean, I view it a lot, maybe like I do, maybe professional, maybe Mike's the same way. Referrals the best marketing, right? I don't feel like I've got to spend money on advertising if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and doing a good job in teaching. Word of mouth is going to spread. We feel in some part it has already. So I don't see a huge need to market that swim lesson program. If we start to see numbers decline, then we may change that. But well, right now we're just continuing to see enrollments. So in terms of the water aerobics class, things like that, we're starting to, as we start to build those things, then there'll be a push to try to do some level of marketing. Social media seems to be where that's supposed to happen. We continue to work with Red Sky as kind of our PR firm, and we'll work with them on probably the best model to try to get some of that information out to the public. That's kind of been their response to us is, hey, let's try to really focus and refine the social media side of this and see if that's a better way to kind of target some audiences for it.
I will say, I've got my little guy in lessons. He's gone twice now. We'll be there again tomorrow morning. And I have to pass along that I'm super impressed with the professionalism
Good.
and the quality of the lessons so far. And there was another, I mean, I'm one of those morning ones, so we have 2 kids, 3 kids. And I will say that the other mom said that she drives by there, didn't quite know what it was, came in, found out they had lessons. So I would say that that parcel gets enough traffic that even just putting little like yard signs out there, like swim lessons and stuff, people drive by that all the time. And I don't think that they're quite aware of what that is yet. But just in my conversations with other moms there, it's like they just kind of drove by and wondered what it was and popped in and, oh my gosh, you have lessons. So just a little tidbit from the ground.
No, it's great. I really appreciate it. One of the things we found great success with is our program director, Chelsea Johnson, who's just hit down the park, was able to connect with several of the daycares in the valley. And so we have daycares coming in the mornings and they bus in 20 kids at a time. And we'll just put 20 kids, spread around our lessons, let them go through lunch for 30 minutes. And by the time they're done, there's another busload of kids. And we're just kind of cycling these daycares through, which has been fantastic. A lot of daycares were either having troubles finding lessons for their kids or they didn't have enough time available. And a lot of them were doing it in the summer and could only do it for a couple months. And so we're excited to see if we can continue them on that process and make this more of a year-round process for them. We certainly find that if you teach your kid for a couple months and think that they're good, you know, a couple months later, they're not going to be good. We want to kind of let those kids continue to be in the water. And so that's been exciting to see. And got a great program with Boise School District. They're busting in their Just for Kids programs a couple times a week just to come play. So it's just kind of fun to just see kids come and just play in the pool a couple times a week. So
And then last thing, fundraising.
continue on that. We're really focusing on our programming right now. You know, the Aquatics Foundation itself and trying to make sure that everything continues to be affordable, offering opportunities for kids and adults that may not otherwise be able to afford it. Those opportunities are still out there. So yeah, we're still targeting, you know, whether it be individuals or companies and really trying to look at what interests them from a programming standpoint and how we can get them involved in the project.
Madam Chair, just real quick, when Cody and Emery and I were out there for the soft opening a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, it was very, the gratification from the parents that were there, you know, their kids couldn't wait to jump in the pool, and they did, but the number of parents that came by and thanked us for our participation, that their kids have a home to swim, you know, for their teams and that kind of thing. I mean, it was pretty cool. Again, they were very sincere and they were very gratified that they had such a neat facility to go to. So
Hopefully you can all make it to the ribbon cutting tomorrow. It's an amazing facility. So thank you. And I will see you twice tomorrow.
Perfect. Well, again, I mean, I know we say it every time, we appreciate all that this group has done. This project doesn't happen without you guys. I think that you're going to be really happy with what we have now and certainly in the long term as well. So thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce Stacy Lisby and Shira Hotbed. Stacy's our senior event manager. Shira has been with us.
7 years today is our anniversary.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
They just got back from venue management school. Most of the management team, or particularly the senior management team, has gone through VMS, and venue management school back in the old days was in Wheeling, West Virginia. Now it's in Florida at a different resort. But it's a 2-year program, and then you get a certificate, and there are tests, there are classes. It's a very intense week, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. And so you go through year 1 and then year 2, and then you get your certificate, and then you can go to Graduate Institute, which is a 3rd year, and you don't have to go to that in any particular, or you can go 2 years the following year, whatever it is, if you want to go back for graduate. And then there's called Senior Executive Symposium. And that's more for directors, higher leadership positions. It had been at Cornell, and they just shifted it to a different university, I think 2 years ago. It used to be that you had to go, it was a 3-year program. So you went year 1, then year 2, and then year 3. If you missed a year, you had to wait to come back to the full cycle. And they've apparently changed that. I made it to year 1. The following year was a contentious election, and so I wasn't able to go. And after that, it just didn't make sense to go through the cycle. Cliff Klinger, our director of marketing, actually went through all 3 years at SES. So they just got back last week, and they were very inspiring at our Monday meeting last week. And I thought it'd be very appropriate for you all to hear where we stack up. You hear Cody and I talk about this all the time, but I thought it would be appropriate to hear from these two. I'm very, very proud of these two. Work a long time with us, and they do an outstanding job on behalf of the facility. But it's the learning opportunities, and as we talk about that retention factor, the investment we make in the human capital, I'll turn it over to these two to let you hear about it.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, just to kind of like fill in on what Pat said, venue management school, it's a week-long, Monday through Friday. We're pretty much in class from 8 to 5 every day, except for Wednesday, where they give you a little bit of a free day in the afternoon. The classes consist of anything from like event management, my business planning, crowd management, a lot of things that have to do with facilities. So we learn different modules each day. One day we have 5, next day I think we had 4, and so on throughout the week. About 20 total that we go throughout the entire week. Venue management school includes people from convention centers, arenas, performing arts centers, theaters, fairgrounds, all throughout the United States and parts of Canada. And it's put on through the International Association of Venue Managers. So I was in year 2 this year and I did pass my test, so I graduated this year. Shira was in year 1, so Shira will continue next year, and then I'll probably haven't decided at GI if it'll be next year or the year after. But just kind of to piggyback on the overview of what BMS is, Pat just kind of asked us for a couple takeaways from the entire week. Probably the biggest thing that we talked about with like facilities, so with convention centers, is the way that their structure is with their org chart. The way we do it here is not like many convention centers. As most of you know, our event team, we are typically Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Most convention centers do not work like that. Their event managers are working from the start of the event, whether it's 4 a.m. or 6 a.m. to when that event ends, could be 2 a.m. So that's their event managers are working anywhere from 60 to 110 hours a week. So when we shared our structure with a lot of people, they were shocked. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to know how we're able to make that work. And really we're able to make that work because we trust our team. We trust our operations staff to make decisions for events on behalf of the event managers. Weekly, we go over all of our events. So our team knows exactly what's happening during the whole duration of those events. So a lot of other facilities don't do that. They don't let their operations manager make a decision for the event. They have to make the event manager make that decision. So the structure that we have here was envious for most people. Some of the event managers, they were exhausted. You could tell, like they were also attending an event for a week, trying to learn better their career when they were still having to work when they were not on site. So what we have here at the center is one of a kind, and we are very thankful that that is what we have here, because we're able to enjoy our job and enjoy our families too. So we thank you all for that structure here.
I think it also is a big reason why we have such retention and longevity here at the Boise Center. Our culture and our process is just so much different than those other facilities, and we are grateful for it. So thank you.
Yeah, on that, like a lot of facilities, their event team, they're like 5 years and above, and that's it. Once they hit that 5-year mark, they're rehiring and retraining because it's hard to work 100 hours a week. Most people don't want to do that. So that was one of our biggest takeaways. The other thing was staffing. We are very lucky here at the center because you all supported Pat when COVID happened and when we retained a lot of our full-time staff. Most facilities, not just convention centers, arenas, performing arts centers, they've all had to start over fresh. New staff, they maybe have a couple of their like executive team members that are still there from prior to COVID, but right now they're having to pretty much retrain an entire team. Again, another thing we stood out to above everybody else is that we don't really have that problem right now. We were able to retain a lot of our key staff members, which really helped us when we jumped right back into having full-on events again. So we thank you for that.
Yeah. Another thing that we found really interesting is the utilization rates. We talked about it in this board meeting, but it is very unique at Boise Center that we have a pretty full calendar. We are not out there desperately seeking events to book at the building. In fact, we sometimes turn away business when it is not a good fit or there's not time or space for that event here. That is not a problem that most convention centers across the nation face. There was a point in one of my classes where one of our instructors asked us about that, and I was the only person in the room who had ever turned away an event. So it's pretty phenomenal that we are as busy as we are. Obviously, we talk about the idea of having more space, and that's the reason why is we are unique in comparison to those other venues.
And then just kind of going down our culture. I mean, we kind of touched it a little bit, but not many facilities have the culture like we have here. I actually received an email this morning from one of the ladies in my class, asking to send more details about our logistics program because they're trying to implement something in their facility. So, so it's nice to be able to share that we all like to come to work and we have a good working culture when we are here at work. So we're above the rest again on that as well.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to that whole idea of logistics being interdepartmental. Food and beverage can rely on operations to help out when is needed. When an event manager builds a BEO, we are being mindful of the impact to our team and overnight resets. They talked about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and we really fall on the positive side of that in a lot of ways. I think that is key, and it comes from our culture.
So those were positive. We did come up with a couple ideas to implement that we haven't fully shared with all departments yet, because when we have our next meeting together, we thought we'd share some of these ideas. But few things that that we came up with was a clear outline, kind of a challenge policy on our booking guidelines. I mean, we're getting to the point where we're as busy as we are, trying to get those events booked within the year, trying to just come up with a better policy for those events, and anything within the year, outside of the year, for all events, conventions, local events. So.
And we kind of have a policy already, but I think that one of the recommendations was to have that in writing, so that when you're explaining the booking policy to clients, you can have that so they know what to anticipate if another group comes along to challenge them, and they're prepared in advance for what that involves.
This was something fun. It was a couple different facilities do this. They created like a pre-visit story. Pretty informal. They had somebody with like their cell phone where they went and parked in the parking garage. So like say you park over here in the parking garage and you take your cell phone going to Boise Center East, room 1, or Boise Center West, room 100, walking down the stairs, walking across the street, kind of like showing them how to get here, showing them like, this is where if you need ADA accessibility, this is the door that you would enter, just kind of making it a little fun video that they have implemented to share with their planners as they're like sending stuff to their attendees before they come to Boise Center. One of the biggest, like we thought of like Boise Center East, clearly people have a hard time finding the loading dock for Boise Center East. So just creating a fun, like it didn't need to be something super formal. It sounded like the facilities that created these were mainly like either their sales team or their marketing team that created like just a fun little video that you could share with your attendees, or that the clients could share with their attendees.
Sure. This one's a little bit more for Brandon Doty. Sorry for blindsiding you. There is something called a show stop plan that is often utilized by like concerts, stadiums, things like that. So that if something were to occur, the artist can't perform, there's bad weather, something of the nature where you need to stop the event midway and get people to exit and leave the facility. There is a plan in place for that. And it seems like something that we should probably talk about. We should have maybe some tabletop conversations and come up with some templates of if we're in the middle of a gala and something needs to stop, how do we make that happen? Who's the one that makes the announcement? Who handles the doors? Who handles this? And just think that through. And then it's something that we probably as event managers should be thinking of on every event. I mean, even in a scenario like this with 20 people in a room, what would we do? Where would we go? Who would talk about it? It was just something I had never really considered before. Obviously we talk about like fire drills, but a little bit different than that. I think it's important just to have that plan in mind. So it's something that we'll be working on. Another idea is probably something you're already doing, but written post orders for the security staff. So again, at like arenas and stadiums, there are a lot more security presence people than we have here at Boise Center, but they are given a written card with instructions on what their role is that day, what they're covering, maybe what the credentials for the event look like, where the nearest exits are. And so I think that maybe we can start implementing something like that in our event planning to just have a better awareness for what the security folks are actually doing and make sure they know the whole plan when they arrive that day.
And then one of our biggest takeaways was just to know your audience, know who you have in the building. Every event is different. We have just knowing who you're gonna be working with, who you're gonna be talking to, and making sure the staff is aware too. We try to do that weekly in our event order meetings, like kind of explaining if we know kind of a background of what the event is. We'll explain that to the team, but making sure that that ends up down on the floor too, so that the floor staff knows who to expect. Like, are you gonna have 300 cowboys in the building, or, 300 ladies over in the east building? Just kind of knowing what you're working with for the day or for the week. And that was it. And I just,
I'm sorry, I want to add one more thing. We kind of jumped past it, but yes, we were in class all day for 5 days. We were also there with a group of 350 like-minded people. And so a lot of the learning opportunity from this experience was after class, at the pool or at the receptions, getting to know our network, meeting people we can call upon if we have a question, or if we are experiencing an event that has not been here before, but maybe was at one of our partner buildings. We really got to make some really great relationships and friendships and build some peers we can learn from. There are a lot of amazing venues out there doing really cool things. And so it was super inspiring and exciting. I think that was the best part of it. So.
yeah. And to that note, I mean, we already have a meeting scheduled next month with a gentleman that we met from Austin, or not Austin, but he's Dallas, to go over the way that they use our booking system and their mapping program. And so it's exciting to meet people that do the same job that we do, and in a different manner, where we can learn from them, they can learn from us. So it was very enlightening. So, but thank you. I mean, we really enjoy the opportunity to be able to travel and learn and better our career here at Boise Center. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
Maybe we should start a consulting revenue stream for
Right.
culture.
Yeah. Great, thank you guys.
Back in the old days, when it was in Wheeling, we learned the most in the library. And a lot of time was spent in the library. The library was the bar. It's called the library. But that's where the network takes place. And even though we're small independent, we don't have the resources as the major companies do to be able to transfer people around and that sort of thing. So one of the focuses and one of the success stories I think the board recognized Cody and his promotion is the awareness that we have as a team here, even though we're small and we're in Boise, Idaho, the exposure that we try to give the team, I think is so important in the growth and keeping those communications going with so many other venues. So that and Allie has done a great job as well, and on the sales side in leading the sales consortium on behalf of IUVM now on a national level. So again, it's these exposure points that allow the small property in Boise, Idaho to keep up with the major facilities around the country, regardless of who they are. And you hear me say all the time that I'll put this team up against any, and that's why. So I'm really proud of the team.
Save the best for last.
Oh, what can be more exciting?
Actually, they set you up really well. Because as they talked about, know your audience. That's specifically what we're gonna do, is we're gonna make sure that everyone out there knows that we know our audience and why our audience is so important to us, and the rules of that.
Yeah, so, that asked me basically like, gee, what are the rules for, gets to use the center? Are there, regulations or other things that apply? And frankly, I didn't really know the answer. I wasn't quite certain where to look, but the good news is we have a couple of summer associates working for us this summer. And the great thing when you're in law school, you're used to, looking at random questions in odd places. So my associate Luke Henry took a look at this, and it's, again, it had not really occurred to me that this is all essentially First Amendment based, and so the rules that regulated us and in terms of who we can allow to come or not come, who we can not come, I guess is the more important question, but in any event, are really based on the First Amendment. And I'm seeing about this when Jody did the swearing in earlier, we talk about, one of the things that you all do is you're hold the Constitution of the state of Idaho, and Idaho's Constitution has in a slightly different format, effectively, the US Constitution's First Amendment is also in the Idaho Constitution. So we're kind of playing by the same rules in any event. And so it turns out that, what you just, what you guys just swore to uphold relates to who gets to utilize the facility and when. So if we go to, mention button, go ahead. This one? Ah, there it is. So, our statutes are that, as you all know, promote economic growth, where, we build, operate, maintain market, public auditoriums, et cetera. It's for community engagement. And the point there is that our properties are public spaces reviewed for a specific category of activity events. And even though, we sort of bifurcate the district from the center, the district being the clearly kind of, you all are the board of the district, it's the governmental entity. Nonetheless, the center is still effectively a government entity. It's owned by we're not a private entity, we don't pay taxes, all those sort of things. And so given that, we are then, subject to the rules related to government-owned property. And there are three types of public forums. Traditional public forums, which are, city squares, sidewalks, public parks. I mean, this started, back in, England, where you were allowed to go in the park and, harangue the king, or at least until somebody came by and stabbed you with, a halberd, or whatever was there carrying along. Non-public forums are, airports, prisons, military bases, courtrooms are in session. So you are allowed to have, public buildings which effectively aren't subject to, are not subject to the use requirements that are generally applied to more public buildings. And then there are limited designated public forums, which is kind of where we are, which is where the governor has intentionally reserved access to certain types of classes or types of speech, like school gyms and auditoriums after school hours, stadiums, theaters. So all of those things are, potentially, areas where some of these rules about free speech apply. And that's basically what we are. So we're a limited public forum because we're publicly owned spaces reserved for events. And events are a form of expressive activity. I was kind of astounded when we, when Luke found all this. I'm like, oh, look, there's case law to all this, and there are a number of examples. Most of everything we found is at the federal level, but as a practical matter, since Idaho is enshrined to all this, we're subject to all the federal requirements. But if the Supreme Court, Idaho Supreme Court, were ever to look at and interpret the Idaho Constitution, they would go the same route. So, because we have these limited public forum buildings, what that means is that the government, in this case, the district / center, can only put content neutral restrictions in place as opposed to content based restrictions. So content neutral restrictions means that the time, place, and manner of use apply to everyone. And so that's really the key for us, is that we can't basically prohibit somebody from using our space because we don't like what they say or we don't like what they do. I mean, there are obviously certain exceptions, hate speech, those kinds of things, of which have been kind of recognized as exceptions by the Supreme Court. But in general, if it's the right wing group or the left wing group, we effectively do not have the ability to prohibit them generally from using our space. Everyone is entitled to use it, provided that they follow our, content neutral restrictions. So, people still have to, provide us information about how many people, what their requirements are. I mean, all the business things that we always have in place, and that Pat and his team have in place. So
I'm sorry, excuse me, could you, point
Yeah.
of clarification, could you go back time, place, and did it say manner? Define legally what how do you interpret that manner legally?
Well,
Time,
yeah,
place,
so,
and manner.
time, place, and manner, again, would be the way that you're going to use the space. So, for example, we can reasonably, I think, say to, any group that, you're not allowed to, turn our, main ballroom into a shooting gallery. We allow people to bring guns, but, you can't use it for a shooting gallery. You can't bring in, again, whatever kind of things, I'm sure you guys get all kinds of wacky requests all the time. So you are allowed to generally limit the manner in which it may be used, again, provided that it's more or less content neutral. Like you couldn't say, well, the manner is that we would not allow, people in dresses to ever come, which effectively would limit, I guess it doesn't anymore, but the theory would be that, well, you never allow women in your facility. You would only allow men in your facility. Those are the kind of things that you can't prohibit. You can have, again, generally logical and reasonable manner restrictions.
Wouldn't it be a good example of food service or room setup, room layout, technical aspects of the use of the space?
Yeah, all those things, as long as they aren't, like the, the Dodgers are going through this right now because they let the, it's a group who were making fun of Catholic nuns appear, and so then they had to allow the nuns to appear or something. Whoever it was who were on both sides, but in their case, they're just getting harangued for whatever it is that's going on, but which may well happen to us, and if it does, I think our point would be that, well, as a public facility, we're required to essentially let most everyone use it in a reasonable manner. And so there we are. Look, it has to be reasonable. And it has to be non-viewpoint based. So that's really the key here. And obviously any of us, have sometimes trouble stepping out of our own shoes and figuring out what's not viewpoint based or is. But I think, I think as long as we, have logical, as Pat says, makes complete sense that we've got to have limitations on how we set up our rooms. And, we don't allow 500 people in this room. There are certain things that just make sense. So the conclusion is that, so the district, can't grant or deny who uses its properties based on the content of the event or the viewpoint of the grant, of the group. But we can have, and the district does have, reasonable non-viewpoint based time, place, and manner restrictions. So we're able to, act generally as a reasonable business would act. But one thing that, we can't do is impose limitations based on, a group's viewpoint, essentially. Isn't that exciting?
Tyler.
Sure. Guns, we can't, automatic weapons. We can't restrict people coming in to the center with automatic.
Well, automatic weapons may be different than guns. I suppose it depends on the type of, again, whatever is reasonable or not reasonable in terms of, certain requirements, but generally speaking, the Idaho legislature has adopted rules which limit the ability of all facilities to restrict folks who want to enter their facility carrying firearms. So we're subject in that case to all of the Idaho legislature rules. that effectively overrides well, or clarifies whatever folks might have thought was reasonable in terms of limiting people who have guns or not guns. Now we're subject to whatever the legislature's rules are on limiting people who bring firearms into various
Let
places.
me ask it another way, Madam Chair. If the airport can prohibit guns, why can't the center?
Because going back to one of these, because depends on what kind of forum you are, and in that case, airports are specifically generally identified as a non-public forum, except maybe the very front part of it. And they are, and because of the obviously the terrorists and other restrictions, you know, it's a reasonable restriction to limit firearms because you don't want, because they're allowed to restrict firearms from planes. We, for whatever, you know, and one can argue the interpretations that have been made of the Second Amendment, but they are what they are, and you know, and in general, they, you know, they don't allow much in the way of restrictions, and for our case, the Iowa legislature specifically adopted rules which say that your ability to limit taking a gun into a public area is relatively limited.
Probably the only exception at the airports is checking through TSA.
Right.
Checked handguns,
Once you're there.
So
rifles and handguns.
we're talking about the client who'd be renting the building. How does this apply to the client's event restricting their attendees? i.e., can the client event restrict guns, or can the client event restrict who comes to their event?
Well, go ahead.
There's an example where a client had a section of the building, the 110s, 120s, and they wanted to enforce no carry. And so that area was cordoned off. We had security on both sides, and the client, had they chosen to go through, that would have had to rent and have the security there to run the magnetometers and to check bags and all that. But the rest of the building would remain as open carry, or, well, you don't know about concealed anyway, but the open carry rule. So that's come up in the past. They either need to rent the entire facility and control access, or in this case, they control access their own section.
And what about the rest? Like, somebody wants to rent the building and they don't want anybody, or a portion of the building, can they do that?
Well, yeah, so. Putting
Isn't
on my, yeah, all right.
Is it,
Putting on my lawyer hat, which, I mean, normally, yeah, everything else I would think about that. You know, I mean, in general, if it's not hate speech, well, for one thing, if we have a group who's coming in, I mean, they are renting the space for their use. So, right, Pat, so they effectively, you know, they say we only want, these 50 people or 100 people to attend. I mean, that's generally the way you allow things to operate. The question is whether, again, it falls into whether they are in general promoting hate speech and whatever those restrictions are. I don't know if you looked at some of those sidelines.
Yeah, the use permit states that they have to comply with the state and local laws, federal laws. So if you're discriminating based on the protected 5, then you probably fall back on that, thinking with one of those 5 protected ones.
Right.
But if it's something crazy, like people only with purple hair can come, then that's
Probably okay.
not done.
it's kind of confusing when you have client and then attendee.
I wanted to confirm from the board, the reason I asked Mike to do this is when we have certain groups that book and social media chatter goes crazy because somebody is at Boise Center and we've been criticized because how could Boise Center allow this group in when in fact they fall within the guidelines that we operate under. And so I asked Mike to make sure that in a public forum, that we address that and that we can put some highlights on our website so that just, because public doesn't understand the rules we operate under. And trying to explain it to them, sometimes they don't want to listen. So I wanted to make sure that in a public, we were able to address this issue and have reference to it moving forward. As much as anything else, to protect the board from criticism by your constituents, as well as my staff who has to deal with, either the social media impacts or the phone calls or whatever. So I appreciate Mike addressing the issue and thank you to the board for helping deal with this issue that hopefully we won't have to deal with. The way that things are happening, in particular over the next couple of years, I think that some of these challenges will only increase as people want to use our facilities. And I just wanted to get ahead of this as best I could.
Bad news is, the next hour is not going to be as interesting as that just was.
All right, any other questions?
I'm sorry, we're not done. What's the next hour?
It's our board training.
Fun legal stuff.
Sorry,
It's fun legal stuff.
I missed that on the agenda.
Oh, you think I was late? I knew today was gonna be a long day.
Well, I just want to say I was looking at our consultants because basically is that the intent of the legislature? And apparently it is.
I would say that we have in particular struggled with the interesting aspect of guns and hospitals. And we have a ton of hospital clients who are totally baffled by the concept that people may have the guns into their emergency room and whatnot. And so it's there are all kinds of intended or unintended nuances of the things that the legislature have done. So
I think for locally too, it causes confusion, as if you go to a football game at Boise State or a basketball game, you're only allowed to bring in a very small quantity of items with you. Now, if you go to the Morrison Center, you walk through a magnetometer. But yet when you come to Boise Center, it's a public building, but we are not really entitled to have that level of security or screening because it's not a college campus, it's not an educational institution. So if I'm the person saying, well, how come at Boise State I can't do this, but at the center I can bring this, then you have a little bit of confusion. And I think the social media stuff is just, it's difficult. It's a little bit tough. It's tougher because it's nuanced and to explain why you can't have it at the college campus, but you can.
Okay. Anything else? Sure, we'll get into.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
is there any chance we could move this training over? I was unaware of the extra hour requirement. I have clients.
I think it's probably stuff that,
it's not like it's time sensitive. Well,
It's simply a review of
it's probably. it's stuff you've
orientation
already-
stuff, so.
You do not have to.
I
Hang out,
can
right?
be excused.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We will continue on, but anyway, let's conclude this. And then we'll take a quick 5-minute break and start the next. So seeing no other business before the board for our main meeting, the meeting is adjourned. See you in